The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by two excellent co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
And Shane Kelly.
And I am so glad to be back talking about IFComp.
I'm not. I hate it. Just kidding. No, I love it.
Yeah, this is episode 2 of our coverage of IFComp 2022. And this has been apologies to our general audience. I have been, on baby leave, and so I haven't been following the comp as closely as I have typically done. But I did listen to the episode that Nate and Laura got out at the beginning of the comp, and it was really great, and it reminded me how much I wanted to get back to it. So I was eager to play some things. And so I've played a handful of things. I've got a few that I want to talk about, and I know Laura and Shane here do too. And we're probably going to continue covering IFComp right down to the wire, probably with one additional episode before the end of the comp on November 15th.
I cannot let it stand that Nate and Laura basically took all of the shortest games in the comp.
Hey, that was Nate. I played one short one, and then I started a 2-hour parser game, so you can't blame me for taking all the short games right up front.
I hadn't really been looking at length, but I gotta say, I've been running into a lot of long ones this time, which, like a lot of the stuff I've been playing or am interested in playing are, not the little quick 15-minute choice-based deals. So I wasn't able to get through quite as many as I might typically do in a week. But how did you guys fare this week?
I feel like there's a lot of meaty games this year.
Mm-hmm. I agree. In fact, the one game that I put a ton of time into, this is a rarity for me in the comp. I wound up doing multiple playthroughs just because it was so replayable and interesting. So excited to talk about it.
All right.
Yeah, I will say one call I want to shout out. If you, I'm looking for my lighthearted Zozzled or the silly game that's got some heft to it, but it's kind of light. I feel like the stuff is a little heavier this year. If you have a really good light suggestion, let us know.
Yeah, where's our wizard sniffer this year?
Exactly.
Not that everything has to live up to that. I still think of that as maybe
pretty
my
high
favorite,
standard.
My favorite game I've ever played in IFComp, but
one of the highest rated ever in the comp, I think.
Adored masterpiece. But things with that fun. I agree, Laura. I mostly the things that I've been playing so far have been a little more on the serious side.
And we do like
bad.
those
That's one of the things. Yeah, we do, and that is one of the things that that interactive fiction does so well. You can do those more serious narratives, but I don't know. Yeah, I'd like some jokey jokes too. Where's my game written entirely in limericks this year?
Oh, there is a rhyming game in the comp this year.
Oh, I haven't spotted that one. Which one is that?
It is called Low Key Learny Jokey Journey.
Low Key Learny Jokey Journey. That's right. I did scroll past that. I had to check that out. That's a really good title. Well, look forward to me checking that one out next week, probably. So I know, Shane, you were just mentioning that you'd put a lot of time into at least one game this week that you'd played multiple times. Would you tell us a little bit about Into the Sun?
Yeah. So Into the Sun is a parser-based, very classic styled game that, there's a lot going on here. It's different from a lot of past parser games that I've seen before. I'll just give you the basic setup. You're sitting, it says, sitting on the cold side of Mercury. You've waited 2 months for space debris to drift through the system, caught in the sun's gravity well. Satellites make for great salvage, and you've earned enough before to scrap by, keeping the Kratos flying, but this time, nothing so far. The radar is barren, you're running low on fuel, and repairs will be costly after being out here so long. Now, something does drift by, and I don't know if I want to consider this as... It's hard to discuss this game without talking too much about the fact that it is very, very much what I would consider a fan game for the movie Alien. This is essentially a cross between the movie Alien and Supermarket Sweeps. Do you guys remember Supermarket Sweeps?
I was obsessed with Supermarket
Yeah.
Sweep.
So Supermarket Sweep is the game where someone is set loose in a supermarket to basically run around and grab as much valuable stuff as they can.
I don't remember watching a lot of Supermarket Sweep, but I remember vividly watching some. Oh, what was it called? It was like
Was
a
it Shop Till You
Nickelodeon.
Drop? Oh no,
Maybe it was like on Nickelodeon, and it was basically that, but it was a kid in a toy store, and I was like, "Go for the video games! Go for the video games!"
They had a minute, and it was one kid. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Toys R Us sweep. Yeah, Supermarket Sweep was the one where you answered a bunch of questions about like the price of beans, and then depending on how well you did on your trivia about the grocery store, you got more time to go on a big endless shopping cart run where you tried to rack up as much money at the grocery store as humanly possible before time ran out.
And I think in Supermarket Sweep, correct me if I'm wrong, the prize was the amount of money and not that you just take home a bunch of turkeys, right?
No, you don't get 30, and you had to limit. You could only get like 5 hams at a time.
You couldn't just go like load your cart full of like 80 pounds of cardamom or something.
Yeah, this was when you were a kid and you didn't realize that like Capitalism, the TV show, wasn't a thing to watch. But
This bag of beans is heavy. It must be expensive.
100%. And the one thing that relatable content, Reagan, is that people who were young parents of young kids would like go to the diaper aisle first and they'd be like, yes, those big bags of Huggies cost $30 a piece.
But they take up so much room. That doesn't seem like good strategy.
It's the risk reward.
I guess so.
Anyway, back to the game,
I can't attest
Shane.
to the diapers being expensive, though. Shane, sorry, continue your description of a completely unrelated property.
Yes. So in this game, you start off in this sort of airlock of this ship. You've kind of gone from your ship into this derelict ship, and everything is quiet. If you're clicking in from the IFComp website, one of the things that I absolutely love when games do this is you get a full map of the game, right off the bat. You can download, and it's very nicely made. It's got it's a nice piece of graphic design. So you open up the map, and you're trying to figure out, well, where's the expensive stuff going to be? And pretty soon you notice that something's gone terribly wrong on this ship. You'll find, I think some of the early items include stuff like a cattle prod and obvious signs of death. I won't get too much into it. And the map is great, and I extremely highly recommend using it because the ship itself is extremely twisty. There are multiple levels to like go up and down. It's not a clear grid. It's a very tricky space to navigate in a good way. And knowing what the different rooms are and seeing the floor plan is really only a starting point for you, because as you explore, you're going to find that, well, while you kind of have a diagram of like the ship's floor plan, something has been tearing through the ship, and a lot of the ways that you might think you could go are blocked off. And now to compound the challenge here, your goal is to go through and collect the most, as much expensive stuff as you can. This is basically just get all the items, right? And one of the nice things here is that you can carry as much as you want. There's no like limit to the inventory. I guess maybe because you're in 0G, your backpack weight doesn't really matter. But as you kind of start exploring, you're going to make your way farther and farther in, and you're going to start hearing things and collecting all the junk. The stuff that you start hearing, well, that is the xenomorph. This is straight up the Nostromo from the original Alien.
So are like in spirit or in explicit name?
Okay, so you can find info about the ship itself on these like punch cards, and you can put them into a computer, and get details. And it does, I think it used the word xenomorph. That might have just been in the like description of the game or something that I read. I did not actually see the word the Nostromo, but the it's very clear. It's very clear where you are.
No shade from me. Like, I love that, honestly.
Yeah,
that's a selling point for me. And is, I don't think anybody's suing IFComp authors right now. So
no, and I mean,
go with God.
I mean, we get fan fiction about Tyrando, and you get fan fiction about aliens. Love IFComp.
So if it's the Fostromo, that's fine too. The alien, when you do find it, that is what really ramps the game up, because on top of collecting all of these items, you can basically turn around and go back to your ship at any time, and it'll give you your high score. And if you can, collect enough items, and that's the challenge in the replayability of the game, is that you go back to the ship, and it's like, okay, you got 1,000, mega dollars worth of loot from this ship, right? The high score that I got was around like 1,200 megabucks. I am nowhere near what I've seen some people discussing this online. I think I have seen a review that said they were over 3,000. So there's a lot of stuff that I missed.
Dang.
But that high end run has to be really just like staying just out of the reach of the alien, because that thing pursues you and like will eviscerate you like that. I have never had so many. I'm very used to parser games having this undo command where I'm like, well, I fucked that up. I'm going to hit undo. We're going to go. All right. Now. Did I say north? I meant south.
Yep.
Well, that doesn't work that well here, because by the time you're close to the alien, like, it's basically going to get you. So you have to have a pretty good sense of where it is. If I have any like criticism of the game, it's that you really do have to be doing multiple runs in order to like really be successful. You are going to have those runs where it's like, okay, yes, it's in the crew quarters. I will just simply avoid the crew quarters. It went from the crew quarters to, deck B. I will start by avoiding the crew quarters, but then when I can tell it's gone to deck B, then I'll go to the crew quarters. So understanding a little bit about the game and about the behavior of the enemy is important. And you only
does it basically walk a set path, or is this something that gets randomized each time?
I don't know if I played in enough to be able to tell you an answer to that. Once I got killed by it a few times, I mostly just like steered really clear of it. But I will say a few cool things about that. The alien is that it messes up the environment. Like, the environment is not static. The alien will like, its acid blood will like melt stuff, and including like opening containers that would otherwise be closed. Like, they get melted open and stuff like that. So they use it in, there's some very, very cool things that every run that I did, I was finding like very new stuff. And the ship is pretty big. Like, it's, I think 3 or 4, like depending on how you count it, it's like 3 or 4 decks and lots of rooms. And, there's a lot of items for you to pick up and improvise weapons out of. I'm not sure. I hope that there is a way to ultimately kill or maybe jettison or something the xenomorph, which would be super cool. I did not get to that point. I was too much of a chicken. But all the while, I didn't mention this. There's one more element that you're fighting the clock on, which is literally there is a clock, because the ship is falling into the sun.
Oh, naturally.
The titular problem. That's cool.
I mean, I just want to watch like a zombie land that's supermarket sweep now. This is really exciting as a concept. I love the idea that it's a risk reward testing how close you want to get. And like, this sounds rad.
Yeah. This is the first game that I played for the comp, and it set a really high bar for me.
Looks great. The next one that we were going to talk about, I think Laura and I both played. We normally try to
Mm-hmm.
coordinate a little bit, and so we have a list and everything. I just picked this out by scrolling through the list, and something about the description spoke to me, and also the name of the author was a bit familiar. And this one is The Absence of Miriam Lane by Abigail Corfman. So if you remember that name, we've previously played a couple of her games in previous comps. Probably the most memorable of which for me was 16 Ways to Kill a Vampire at McDonald's. She also wrote A Murder in Fairyland. She has some commercial IF as well that I'm blanking on the name of. It's like Open Sorcery or something like that. It's
Open Sorcery.
That's it. Thank you. So she's been pretty prolific, and this seemed like a bit of a departure, especially if you're thinking about 16 Ways to Kill a Vampire at McDonald's. The Absence of Miriam Lake. I'm just going to read the description, which I think is just poetry and was very, very much why I played this game. The description on the page says, "Sometimes," and this is also text in the game, "sometimes people give pieces of themselves away. Sometimes they give too much, and who they are wears thin. They become an absence, a hole in the world, and a terrible light shines through." And it is described as an eldritch mystery, which is really it's a really cool concept.
Spooky. Yeah, I love that.
It's very spooky. Without spoiling too much, I think I can describe the sort of central idea of the game, which is that you are some sort of an investigator, and a man comes to you who says that he's having trouble remembering his wife, and that other people in his life also can't remember her either. She's gone, and he's had to remind his children. His children will remember her if he reminds them that she existed, but otherwise they don't remember that she was ever there. And you, the investigator, this is apparently what you do. This is something you've seen before. And so you are going to the house of this missing woman, Miriam Lane, although it takes a while to discover her name. I'm surprised they put it in the title, because discovering her name is literally part of one of the puzzles. Discover and find this person. And the way that it describes this person's absence is extremely cool. So it has that that line in the description, "a terrible light shines through." When this person disappeared, they left holes in the world, and those holes are places where the light doesn't behave correctly. So the basics of this game, this is a choice-based, twine-based game, but it's one of those twine-based games that does that thing where it's very it feels kind of like Twine almost meeting in the middle with Parser, where you are navigating between rooms and using verbs, and you have an inventory.
Yeah, and this is a very beautifully handled game. There's music. There is, when you are looking at a person, the husband, it's like this. It's almost like a drawing that's gone through a fax machine. It's got it's just black and white sketch, just highlights. Really lovely pictures of the environment. It feels very caring, and this is my UI corner where I praise things. Is at times you acquire thoughts, which are things you can apply to actions. That's where that parser element comes in, I think. It's like when you're on a page in a room and you're looking at a book, say, you can then say acquired thought, like, this is unnaturally aged. And you can say, I think this book is unnaturally aged. And if you are correct, you get more awareness of surroundings you're taking on the light. And if you're not, it will just give you another piece of text. So there's a lot of puzzle elements that feel very parser, but it's all in this very easy to use Twine interface. And it's all, it's color coded. They've got really nice formatting. It's very clear what you can and cannot do, which is not always true with these games. So I really appreciated the care. This felt like a bit of a level up. I enjoyed A Murder in Fairyland. It also had a lot of these elements, but I think this style felt a lot more atmospheric to me. Also, there's a progress bar. there's
Yeah,
something I can't see and it's a progress bar. Like, that is so enticing.
Yeah, specifically, like there's times in the game where you're collecting items and using them to fill in your understanding about Miriam Lane, or I don't want to spoil it, but sort of interacting with the voids in the game, and you do have this kind of like element of like deciding which objects are going to improve the situation and clarify things, and which ones will worsen the situation. And you might think, I understand, I can give her or provide this, this portrait that I found, I took off the wall in the hallway. And if you don't have a good understanding of like what that portrait means to the, Miriam Lane, then you might give it to her, and it is counterproductive, and you see that progress bar kind of tick down, or if it was something that was very important to her, it might tick up. I was also very appreciative of the fact that it gave you save slots for this. This has multiple endings, and so you can have a bad end and you do get an ending. But I was, when I was screwing up, essentially, I was more interested in just sort of trying to get a good ending, and so I was save scumming a little bit, and this game totally allows for that. Maybe more so than any Twine game I've ever seen. This gives you like 25 plus save slots with manual saves, clear buttons to click to confirm that you want to load or overwrite a save. You can name your saves. It's extremely like well done in terms of just the mechanics. Even for a very short game like this, it's nice to have that sort of level of control.
I would suggest, if you're risk averse or think you might want to save scum, to save before you start showing objects. Just like gather a bunch of objects, save, and then play immersively until you die, and then go back and just show the good objects. It's not that it's trivial to, because it's just showing objects and getting reactions. I think there's things to learn for good and bad.
Yeah,
it's a game about empathy. It's a game about like the objects that belong to one person in a shared household, which is I found really interesting, because there's objects that are tied up in her children, objects that are tied up in her husband, items that are tied up in her social life, and there's things that are just for her. And you can sometimes intuit it, and sometimes you need to look around at the environment and be like, oh no, this feels special. Or you read something on the fridge and go, oh no, this used to be special, but now it's tied into a chore. So you really need, like, if you don't want to just test every object, you can also, gather a lot of stuff and be really thoughtful with it. I think
you find something that seems really meaningful to Miriam Lane, and you hand it to her husband, and he says, I don't know anything about that.
Oh,
jackpot.
It's heartbreaking. This guy does not know his wife, and it's sad. But you also can look at things and be like, oh, is this, this book on John Adams, is this hers? Like, you just show it to him, and he's like, oh yeah, great man, very insightful. And you're like, don't show this book to her. It has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
She does not care about John Adams. It's a tender game. I was surprised by that.
I agree. My one complaint about it, and this might be a theme for me in the comp this year, because I've my brain is on baby right now, and so I'm not finishing a lot of stuff. I got the bad ending on this one. I wanted to get the good ending, but I ended up feeling like and I had a sense of what I needed to do to get the good ending, but maybe not quite specific enough, and it felt a little bit unreasonable. I knew that there was some stuff involved in like cross-referencing information from her gardening journal with other things in the house that I wasn't sure what to look for, and then finding flowers and stuff. And anyway, I had a really hard time getting the good ending in this game. I want to hear a little bit from you about like how much work did you have to put into, once you kind of grokked the situation, how much work did you have to put in to get the good ending?
Not that much. I think a few things I had played with. Spoilers, if jump ahead a couple minutes to the next chapter if you don't want to hear any spoilers in this, but there's a gardening book with flowers, and by her bed, like she mentions in a couple places, she mentioned a chrysanthemum that she was interested in. It's on her bedside table. And then in the like a gardening book elsewhere, she has a handwritten note about how she recited poetry to the poppies. So you can kind of give a flower that has meaning by picking that flower from the flower bed and giving it to her. That's the only puzzle I could say was there.
I got that. Was that the only thing? I thought I had that. Was that the only thing that you needed to do in order to like?
There were a couple other things. There were some hidden objects. So if you picked up the dress pattern, which you shouldn't give to her because it's a chore,
right?
Underneath is a drawing of a bird.
Oh, I didn't get that.
If you sort through the dress, the pile of fabric, there's actually a negative thing in there. Again, spoiler for folks who haven't played, but like there's a half empty bottle of laxatives.
I found that, yeah.
So like there's things you get by like picking up and playing with objects. You can pick up the music on the shelf, and like it's classical music or a musical. And if you show the musical to the husband, he of course thinks it's silly and stupid, so you know it's hers. There's a lot of little things like that. So picking up things. A thing I didn't know until later was that you can show things to the husband, which I found really helpful. But the most important thing I think is at some point you've given enough things that she becomes present. Did you ever get to that point?
No, see, that's what I missed out on, because I got the bad ending, and I was getting close enough to the recording time and I wanted to try some other games that I just said, okay, well, I've got the bad ending. Maybe I'll go back to this later.
That felt really meaningful. So you get, she becomes present, and it's almost like one of those seance pictures of the floating woman where her eyes are closed and she's very white and ghostly. And you pick tell her story. And once you click that, it's using the twine mechanic where you replace the text. You keep clicking on it and it cycles through the carousel. And you are basically taking you're trying to tell a story, and you might, click on the name. Like, is it the husband's name Arthur or Anthony or, and you're just cycling through to get the answers right based on what you've picked on. And if you get a certain percentage, and some of it's motivation, like she no longer feels joy in baking because it's a chore. Like, so you're filling out a combination of feelings and guessing and what you actually get into in the house. You come up with a story. They said there's multiple good answers. I got a version that said you didn't get it 100% right, but you got it, like, enough was true that that you passed. And she came back to life and had a very dramatic ending. But to me, it felt very Speaker for the Dead. I know Orson Scott Card is problematic, but Speaker for the Dead is very meaningful to me, and it's a book where it's an amazing book. So it lives. Who are authors anymore? I say during IFComp, but it felt very Speaker for the Dead.
I really like that we're seeing. This sounds like a game that has, although it is a twine game, it has a significant amount of like exploration and puzzle while simultaneously also being poetic in the way that so many twine games often are. Like, this seems like the kind of game that will do very well in the comp. I'm intrigued to play it.
I hope it does.
Yeah, agreed. I think they've got a lot of great ideas.
Yeah, and some really killer lines.
Yes.
I know you took a couple of screenshots here, Laura. Do you want to share anything?
Sure. I think one of the earliest things, the three acquired thoughts, the three things you could apply to things, I found fairly poetic, which are light and shadow is acting strangely. Another one is this is unnaturally aged or faded. And then there's something here that I cannot see.
Those are the things that you're looking for as you're exploring the house, which I like. The idea that this is like an eldritch mystery is interesting. Like that you're encountering like holes in reality left by. I love the sort of very, very poetic idea of like that when somebody gives away too much of who they are, they become these holes.
Yeah, sometimes they give too much and who they are wears thin. And this is literally about a woman who loses herself because she's given too much of herself away.
Yeah, which is and specifically like a wife and mother, and like that's a resonant theme. And
the game is giving her back. You're literally giving her back to herself
Mhm.
by objects that are only hers, which is a really lovely poetic concept.
Yeah, but it's also creepy because
Oh, yeah.
it's these like weird, creepy, unearthly places where the light doesn't shine in the right direction, or it's too bright, or it's too dark, or other weird stuff is happening. Like that, it's a cool intersection of this like very poetic idea and this very like, I wouldn't quite say like horror-y idea, but like this, it's a really interesting intersection, and that was what kept me going with it. Was like I initially thought, well, this seems like it's going to be just poetry, right? And then I realized it's very sort of like an actualized metaphor, right? It's interesting. So I liked the way this was presented quite a bit.
Really seems like it functions like a mystery, but while also being very abstract. That seems very cool.
So anyway, I give this one a strong recommendation, even though, like I said, I only got the bad ending. I need to go back and put a little more time in. But fortunately, I'm quite confident that my game was saved. Like again, they did a great job here with the saving, which is something that I often find annoying with web-based stuff. So anyway, very good. Laura, I think you had the next game on our list here.
Yeah, I played a game called Admiration Point by Rachel Helps. And this is a game that's described as you work at a virtual exhibit artist at a digital cultural museum. There is a glimmer of attraction to your coworker. You are married and Mormon. And then it's called an anti-romance. So this was getting some interesting reviews. And when I started, it puts you right in to your work designing one of the digital VR exhibits. The idea is that you are a 3D artist. You are putting on shows in virtual reality. The first one that you're doing is you have you're working in a restaurant gallery, and there's a bunch of plates that are on the wall, and the people can take them down and break them. And then you have to hit the cleanup button so they go back on the shelf so next people can break the virtual plates. And then they're based off of a TikTok artist. And then you find out that it's, 2070 or so in the future. It's not quite defined, but this is basically a digital cultural museum looking back at today and near future exhibits and trying to capture social media, memes, etc., as performance art for people in the future to understand the world. And that's not even the point of the game. That's just your job in the game.
That's just like a really, really interesting like setting, or whatever you want to call that. That's like thinking about how history and art will reflect the present at a distance is very interesting to me.
Yeah, but the game at its heart is about like your bosses. You have a supervisor, and then you have the exhibition curator who you're working with, who's like the guest artist, and you kind of develop a crush on Sean. Like, and it's unclear to you if this is a sexual attraction, if it is a professional crush, if it's envy because Sean has a better career than you, and you think you like it is better at doing things than you are. And you're like, I could have had Sean's job. Sean worked at a cool game company you wanted to work out in the past. And you read his book and his thesis and are like, oh man, these ideas are cool. The counters on the side are tracking your obsession with Sean, how Sean feels about you, and what you've decided to do with your feelings. Like, are you going to use your feelings? Are you going to ignore your feelings? Are you going to act on your feelings? You can't have a romance in this game, but you can do various things. And what I actually really enjoyed is those are all just icons, and they're kind of obscure. Obsession is a little circle that gets drawn into a spiral as you do more and more things. All with this backdrop of like building game arcades for to demonstrate like TikTok video interactive art. Like you're doing all of this work stuff, and then you're trying to decide how you're spending your workday while Sean is around. Do you sit at his table? Do you sit nearby? Do you ask questions about him? A lot of times when I play games that are about romance, that is the only thing the game is about. And it was very cool that the job was just as important in this game as the romance. And maybe that's just the way I played it, because I got the 4th ending out of 5, which was avoidance. So maybe I just was into the job more than Sean. There is no smooching ending. That was in the credits. It's an anti-romance, but
Understood.
You can choose to get obsessed with Sean if you want to. And I guess I just kept being like, keep reading the book about memes and culture. I want to keep reading this like fake academia about what happens in the future. I want to hear about how MGM was formerly the state of Nevada. Like, that's the stuff I'm in this game for. I think both are valid, probably. So I would be really interested in if folks wanted to take more of the I, for example, after a party, like they're like, you're really tired after a day of working and you can go out to dinner with their coworkers or go home. And I was like, I'm going to go home and go to sleep. There's probably cool stuff, but I went home and had sex with my husband. So go me. So I think it's it's at an hour and a half. I believe that's probably if you're playing like for multiple endings, or I chose a lot of limiting paths. I don't know which one is true. And I'm a little surprised I don't know which one is true. Normally I have a better sense of it, but it felt like there were a lot of options, a lot of text to read. I do also know I'm faster at reading false academia than most, because I read a lot of that kind of. I'm literally reading a 600-page book called Administrative Burden for work right now. So
R.I.P. Laura.
It's very good for my job. I'm just saying, it might be an hour and a half, or it might be closer to 45 minutes if that's your bread and butter reading material. Little piece about how you first noticed Sean that I really enjoyed. And it has that blend of near future stuff. In the break room, you snack on food that was traditional in physical exhibit openings, or so they say. A fruit tray, cheese, and some synthetic meats. There's a box of wine, too. Sean is there, along with his department chair, the marketing person, and one of the digitization crew. You notice Sean's lovely gray and curly hair and his well-fitting pants, and idly wonder if he was hired to be a pretty face for the museum. You realize he is the same height as your husband. Uh-oh.
I don't know.
But very neutral, right? It takes a very you notice him, but it's plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting tonally.
This whole idea of an anti-romance is very interesting to me, because I like a romance. I love a romance. I even like an office romance. I even like a forbidden romance. I like them all. But this idea of an anti-romance of this is a story about potentially wanting a romance and then no. I don't know. You
denying it, circumstances denying it, the job denying it, Sean denying it. I think it is there's no happily ever after.
It feels like going in with that knowledge that there's no happily ever after. It serves it probably, but it also puts a little bit of a damper on it if you're the romance craver. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I've also never played I've never played a piece of IF that was specifically dealing with a particular branch of Christianity, like this one seems to be. I just wonder how that was portrayed. And I mean, I just clicked through to the author's Twitter bio, and I see that she's a Wikipedian in residence at the BYU library. So I'm guessing Mormonism is a big part of her life. How is that treated in the game? Tell me about that part.
So I didn't see as much explicitly about Mormonism, although it is covered. I think there's a lot of discussion about hesitancy towards having a second child is a really interesting concept of not enjoying pregnancy, the idea of motherhood. They talk about there's a throwback mention of the Handmaid's Tale and makeup and femininity. So I think there's a lot of Mormon influences, a lot of things about family life and culture. The religious aspects are not part of it, but I could tell that it's written from a very specific cultural point of view. Just as you could say something from a secular Jew is written from a Jewish point of view. it felt like almost like secular Mormonism. And there might have been religious content that I missed, but it felt like Mormon point of view, but not, they never go to a church in the game that I played, at least.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious to hear more about it, or to play it myself once I have a little bit more time.
And at the end, there's actually a section on like more Mormon gaming authors is in the credits, which I found really intriguing.
Well, there's no good segue between that and the next game that I
There
played.
never is an IFComp. It's just a
Simply
grab
none.
bag. Next
Yeah.
chapter.
If I were smart, I would have put this after Shane's game at the top, because it is also a sort of arcadey space game. And so I put a fair amount of time into Star Tripper, which is, so I came across this game. This is Star Tripper by Sam Ursu, which is one of only 2 choice script games in the comp this year. I picked it specifically because of that. I was thinking about like, well, what would I like to play? And I always really enjoy games written in choice script. It's the sort of open version of the choice of games, developed engine or whatever you want to call it, the games writing tool. What I really like about choice script games is that they typically will provide you like a page of text, and you're making a choice at the end of every single page, which I quite like. I like that it keeps you involved, even if not all of those choices are meaningful. It keeps you engaged by constantly giving you something to choose. And it's also very flexible, and it's really designed around a lot of choice script games do a lot of behind the scenes like statistics or modeling of things. So, but I didn't really know much about what this game was going to be about until I got into it. In fact, when I started it up, I thought it was the same game Shane had been talking about, because this game was here. Let me pull up the description again. The little slug below the title is a text arcade game. And Shane had been talking about how he had played a game about, in the Discord, he was obviously talking about Into the Sun, but he'd been talking about playing a game about, doing supermarket sweep on a spaceship or something like that. And I thought, surely a text arcade game, Star Tripper, this must be that same game. But it is not. It is an entirely different game. And
one
also
would
very
easily
interesting.
make a confusion there. There's also another game called, what was it? Towards the Sun instead of Into the Sun. What was the other one?
Chase the Sun?
No, that's that old PlayStation game.
Yeah, but Chase the Sun is also in the comp.
Yes, Chase the Sun is also in the comp.
Which is...
Oh, okay.
There's Into the Sun and Chase the Sun are both games this year.
Control F, Sun. 7... Into the Sun, Chase the Sun. I don't see any other Sun titles, but definitely 2 very similarly named.
Yes.
But yeah, Star Tripper is... and the other thing I thought was kind of funny about Star Tripper, before I get into the content of the game, I feel like it does require some description, because the description on the comp page is exceptionally non-specific for folks who are not specifically familiar with a particular Palm Pilot game. The description on the comp page just says, inspired by the Palm Pilot game Space Trader. Note to experienced IF players, if you try lawnmowering this game, lawnmowering is in quotations, I assume that's a thing, but I don't know that phrase in this context. If you try lawnmowering this game, you're not going to have any fun, and you won't find everything in 2 hours anyway. Just relax and enjoy your time in this world. Thanks. And then it gives you some warning about the consumption of alcohol being present in this game, which, fine, great. I'm doing it right now.
Get lawnmower. Use lawnmower on grass.
First of all, I did have a Palm Pilot, but I don't think I ever played Space Trader on it. But given that it's described as an arcade game and then is referencing back to a Palm Pilot game, I was expecting this to basically be a Space Trader game. Maybe like a lemonade stand in space or something like that. And it is kind of that, but it's much more narrative than I was expecting, given its very sparse description that includes no details of the plot. So the game starts with asking you some questions. It asks to choose, who do you feel closer to, a brother or a sister? And so, of course, I chose a brother. And then it asks you to, in relation to your brother, would you consider yourself their brother, sister, or it gives you a like non-gender specific SIB option.
Mm-hmm.
And then it asks you for your brother's name. So, of course, my brother's name was Shane. And then
Hello.
It weaves that into the story, and it gives this game, for a game that's basically like Space Trader via text. It has an extremely long intro sequence where it sets up the world of the game, who you are playing as, sort of conspiracy theory. So the overall world isn't like anything great shakes by science fiction standards, but it's kind of interesting. You are one of a member. You're a member of a sort of central, powerful family in a galaxy-wide civilization, but your family has been double-crossed by some sort of syndicate of other families that have, that are challenging your family's power, and you get a coded letter from your brother who's been kidnapped by the syndicate and is smuggling a message out to you. And he's told you that you can rescue him, but you have to cast aside all of the wealth and privilege that you've had because, of course, they'll be monitoring your money and your ships. You have to start from scratch with something untraceable. So he introduces you to an old contact of his, who's now living rough in a distant sector of the galaxy and has an untraceable, crappy spaceship that you can get for free in order to come rescue him. But in order to come rescue him, you're going to need a lot of money to buy some kind of special golden key to access the right sector of space to be able to go in and rescue him. And so the majority of the game seems to be making enough money via space trading simulation in order to upgrade your ship and have enough money to like buy what you need to go and rescue your brother and take down the conspiracy that is imprisoning him, which is a pretty cool setup. If you're going, I'm reminded a little bit of like one of my favorite IF games of all time, Superluminal Vagrant Twin, which is also a game about space trading in a text-based mode, trying to rescue your sibling, in this case, your twin, Shane. So I was having like serious flashbacks of Superluminal Vagrant Twin, another excellent game and Zizzy Award winner from a few years ago. But this was doing it in choice script, of course, instead of in the parser angle of things. And I didn't play.
Sorry to interject, but I'm struggling to like figure out where the arcade element is when it was described as a text arcade game.
That's a really good question. I don't really think of this as being arcadey in the slightest. So I'm wondering what arcade means to Sam Ursu,
cool, yeah.
As opposed to. So for me, like a lemonade standy go to, or that lemonade stand is a wrong version of this, but the sort of like space trading. What's that game that has the very polygonal graphics and you just fly from
Elite?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe Elite, or I always go back to Escape Velocity. For these sorts of things, a game about you start in a terrible little tiny spaceship and go from planet to planet trying to exploit the economy.
Is this really another chance for me to talk about No Man's Sky, my favorite clone of Elite?
Shut up, Shane! Stop it! No, I'm spraying water on your face. But it's like I said, like I spent quite a long time just getting to the space trading action of this game. I'd say, I'm reading slow these days. I played this across a few sessions because, baby and everything else. And just not, this is the kind of game that I think I would devour in a tab while working. But given that my current life is that like I had to specifically dedicate time to sit down with it, this is listed as 2+ hours. And I think it's definitely one of the longer things you'll probably play in the comp. This is probably intended to be something that you explore over, a long period of time. Within the sort of comp judging time, you can easily play through its intro sequence and get a sense of the world and maybe do a little bit of brief trading. But I didn't get enough of the trading angle to really get a sense of how much I liked that part of the game. All I can say is that this is a space trading game that goes above and beyond with its story, at least in the introduction. And that's very interesting to me. So I'm interested to play more of this. I think it's well implemented. But like I said, like I didn't have enough time to spend enough time with it to get enough of a sense of the space trading angle to say whether it has legs to take me through what's clearly a pretty long experience. Again, it's a web-based game that's done a great job with saves. That's important in a game like this because it's going to be pretty long. I never had any issues with it remembering my saves. It has multiple save slots, all of that sort of thing. So, high marks there. It has sound. The sound was not vital to the experience, but cute, and you could turn it on and off. It has a nice statistics view where you can see things like, obviously the statistics of your current ship and other information like that. It even has achievements. It has little pop-up like Chivos, which is something I don't think I've ever seen in an IFComp game.
No.
It has an achievement screen where you can see a list of all of it doesn't have any hidden achievements that I'm aware of. It just gives you a list of all of them. There are things like, I don't know, I'm just at a glance, seller's badge, sell something at one of the planetary markets, 3 points. Rescue underway, complete the quest to rescue your sibling, 5 points. Red Baron, defeat another ship in battle, 15 points, that kind of thing.
I've seen a point system, but I've never seen them framed quite like that in achievements.
Yeah, and they literally like have little pop-ups, kind of like, like you're on Xbox or whatever. So I like that about it. I think it's really cool. So I think if you're interested in having a sort of space trading game, up in a tab away from it when your boss walks by or whatever, this is a really good one of those that goes a little this is, as far as I can tell so far, a good one of those that goes really the extra mile with its narrative, and has dialogue when you go to the bar and drink with the guy who's going to tell you that the jade cubes are worth more on Ganymede or whatever. Like he has dialogue as opposed to just being a menu click, which is nice. So I think this is pretty interesting as an approach to this, even though obviously the like space trader genre is pretty crowded. There's a lot of these, if you want one of these that is more IF-y, this is pretty cool. And again, I love choice script games, and there were only 2 in the comp this year. So, hey, there you go. So I would recommend people check it out. That's is Star Tripper by Sam Ursu.
Awesome. And next up, I think we got Shane, right?
Yes. Now this one is, I'm kind of on the lookout for kind of the more weird, especially weird and very short games for the comp. So the one I am wanting to talk to you about is called To Persist / Exist / Endure, Press 1 by Anthony O. So this is a pretty interesting kind of experiment in IF that is very, very hard for me to categorize. It was particularly interesting for me because I love a game that's 15 minutes. Those little like snack-sized games that are, especially when they have tags like experimental, like, yes, give me this more, please. And I would say that so first off, this is it's a phone tree as a game. Kind of imagine being trapped in a surreal phone tree where, you are being asked to, you basically are exploring and navigating by like pressing 1, pressing 5. That's the idea. It's hard for me to talk that much about the game without like really giving a bunch of quotes from it or spoiling bits of it. But one thing I can say is this feels very experimental from someone who has done a lot of experiments. The creator of this, Anthony O, has done multiple games for past comps, and this one is pretty it's pretty out there. I would say, like, if I have a criticism of the game, it's that it doesn't really feel like it fully explored what it could do. I messed around with it a few times. You can make your way through the game in 15 minutes, but you're really going to have to play it a few times to get a good sense of the humor. It's both. It's trying to do a few different things. It's trying to be funny, but also kind of nihilistically, like, dark humor. It is fun, and the descriptions and the writing is good, but I didn't come away with it feeling like I had, like, done anything or been challenged. It's not that kind of game. So it's one of those things where, like, it felt like going into a strange museum exhibit and kind of wandering around for a bit. It uses a piece of IF tech called texture, which I don't know if you've run into anything using this before. It's the kind of IF where you drag and drop things onto each other. And
Nosebleed, which we covered last time, has a similar mechanic.
Yeah, the drag and drop element. That's one thing where I feel like they didn't really exploit it that well. Like the things that you're dragging and dropping, it's really basically you're just hitting from a list of, like, a menu of options, right? Because it is explicitly like a phone tree, like choose a button, 0 through 9.
Yeah.
And with occasionally the option to do things like hang up or throw the phone. But really all of your interaction is dealing with the phone menu system. And there are a lot of options. Some of them are pretty off the wall, like, press 2 to hear a list of all our departments. Press 3 for Polish. And, you press 3 and now the whole game is in Polish. And, it definitely is like a quick...
Didn't Kentucky Route Zero try something very similar to this at some point?
They did, yes.
Yeah, it actually did remind me of that. It's funny. It's very similar in the vibes to that. There are a lot of options in the game, but overall, like, it is specifically about it's a game about trying to recreate the futility of trying to find a human being on the other end of a phone tree. And that's I have not I'm not seeking that experience out in most things. When it has come up in games, like you mentioned in Kentucky Route Zero or here, it is a fun play on choice in games. Like, what is choice when it's really just a choice between a series of useless, pointless options. So I enjoyed my time with this game. I don't know where I'm going to rank it finally in the comp, but the writing was enjoyable.
Something I have to bring up, even though it's not an IFComp, is Shinyin Core, who did Amending, the solo game that was embroidery based. I don't know if you heard about this.
No.
She is an experimental, like, game designer where she tries to think about, like, what's long-term, like, memento. How can you play a game and also have, like, a long-term object that you create by the end of it?
Oh, I think I do remember hearing about that, but I don't know much about it. Go ahead, sorry.
Of all things that they decided to do, they did a phone hotline that they described as an existential horror phone sex hotline, 3 to 5 minutes each call, called the Bureau of Telephone Fornication. It is not a sexy phone line. There is nothing sexy behind this phone number. I think it's still live. I just pulled it up. I'm not going to call it now for obvious reasons. I'm recording a podcast. But if you call 760-993-5828, you're going to get a bunch of very unsexy existential horror answers to your phone tree. It's absolutely wild that this is a real life thing. At some point, I think there's a MIDI hallelujah plays. One of the dominatrixes makes you pick which wood and then gives you, like, a long speech on the history of maple. I played it like twice and I was like, this person's brain is broken. And so if this game is anything like that, just want to shout out for a little free experiment related to nothing.
Gotta love it.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Oh, you've reminded me of one of my favorite prompts in the game. And there's lots of endings, if you want to call them endings. It's just times where you hang up mostly. There's a point in the game where the drag and drop interaction is one of the words you can drag up is break, and you can either drop it onto break the phone or break down. And if you break down, you don't know how it happens. There's tears streaming down your cheeks. There's a tightness in your throat. And the message that had been saying, like, we're sorry, we weren't able to record your voicemail, instead says, we're sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry.
Love it.
Yeah.
We're sorry.
Pretty experimental. I like it.
Yeah, it's a fun one for I like, if you're gonna go this weird and this it just literally feels like someone is messing around with these tools and maybe even sat down to create something without like a full picture in mind. It's just felt very much like an experiment, like something that they put together just to see what would come out of it. And it's kind of fun to experiment with as a player as well.
It's absolutely wild that the next game that we're going to talk about is like probably a 10+ hour game. Should I get into it? You got anything else?
Yeah. I want to hear about this one.
Yeah. So I played, it did not complete for obvious reasons. The Only Possible Prom Dress, Return to Stufftown, parentheses, an interactive shopping emergency by James Aikin.
So good titles this year.
Very good title. This apparently is a sequel to a IFComp or just interactive fiction game from 1999 called Not Just an Ordinary Ballerina. About like your kid, Samantha. The first one was you broke into this mall to get the Sugar Toes ballerina toy. And you've been banned from Stufftown ever since. But now Samantha's 17. Her prom dress has ink spilled on it. And the only place in town that has a copy of that prom dress, is the only possible prom dress for her, is in Stufftown. We are not only banned from Stufftown, but there is a lacrosse parade happening. And so everybody in town has gone to the parade. So the whole mall is empty pretty much. So you're trying to break into an abandoned mall to get the prom dress. Things you should know about this mall. It is 3 stories tall. Every single shop seems to have a puzzle in it. When I'm trying to get a sense of the scale. So I looked at the reviews in glowing 5. There's only 2 reviews right now 2 ratings rather in IFDB, and both are 5 stars, but there's 2 because it's so big. And MathBrush said, I've played 2 hours, getting 20 out of 250 points and unlocking much of the map.
Oh my God.
20 points and 250. And it's the kind of thing as you keep playing, the maximum number of points jumps up.
Oh no.
So like, who knows if it's out of 250 or if it's going to suddenly jump up to 500. Like, who knows how big this game is? I certainly don't, because I only played for a couple hours. But also, most of the map is open at the beginning, but you can't get into anything. So you can wander around the mall lost. And just every door is locked. But I will say that I was overwhelmed and took a break because I got overwhelmed by the map. But I cannot think of a more helpful system than they've got. You can download a zip with multiple maps of every floor and like a bird's eye view of the thing. There is
That's
a
really
walkthrough.
Nice.
Quality of life stuff. The directions you can go in are always at the top of the screen, and the places you haven't been are in, like, if you haven't gone south, south will be green. So you know at any time which directions you've tried. Lots of little things to make it easier on you. I used those maps pretty quickly. I had a little bit of trouble sometimes trying to use like to get quickly from one place to another, but I think I probably would have found the right like shortcuts to do that, and I wasn't worried. One thing that I really did find exquisitely helpful is when you ask for instructions, you get like 4 pages of like how every single instruction of the game works and how like it is made for like crunchy parser folks. I'm actually shocked this isn't IFComp and not parser comp. I'm glad because I wouldn't have played it otherwise, but I was really surprised because it feels, they call it a parser based puzzle fest in the classic mode, packed with chatty characters and unlikely perplexities. I've encountered octopuses, like a hairdresser who wanted to go smoking and just followed you around. I've been, there was a homeless man who saw pixies. I feel like I've seen maybe 5% of this game. And I played it for longer than all the other games combined.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, it sounds
It's
really
good,
compelling.
but it's just like, I have no idea how to rate this. It's so big, right? Like when it's 2 hours and you're maybe a 10th of the way through, like I have no idea how to rate something like that. So it's an interesting problem. I feel like not enough people are going to play this because it's so big and people like a little bite-sized snack. We just talked about the glory of a 15-minute game.
Yeah.
This is one that I feel like I don't want to eat the whole sandwich right now. Like I've got like a full foot-long sub and I'm eating maybe like 2 inches of it and then I'm full. But I'm going to keep on eating that sub because it's really well made and I can tell like I'm in good hands. I just need to do it slow.
I really appreciate a really polished parser game, and I really love when they give you like even digital feelies, like here's maps, here's a PDF of something to do with the background of the game, that kind of thing. I love that stuff,
and it doesn't feel repetitive. Like I've had conversational problems. There's been codes. There's been like physical things. Like all the puzzles feel different. I just have no idea how many of them there are.
That's really impressive. That's very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of puzzles, the next one on our list is we couldn't do IFComp without playing an Arthur DiBianca game. And by some weird quirk, I seem to have been deputized as the person who plays the Arthur DiBianca games, despite being the least suitable Arthur DiBianca player in the entire podcast.
I feel like every year you play them, give this review, and then 3 weeks later, I play it and give a different review.
Yeah, which honestly, Laura, I was kind of hoping that you would play the trouble in Sector 471.
I was too busy wandering the mall. That was the problem. I chose too big of a parser. So
Arthur DiBianca is my nemesis. Actually, last year, his game, what was it called? Grandma Bethlinda's Remarkable Egg, I think, was wonderful. I thought it was great. Arthur DiBianca has a long history of making basically very puzzly, whimsical, limited parser puzzle games. So almost all of his games, at least all the ones I've played, give you very limited parser tools. They don't usually have you doing the sort of very basic, go north, get lamp kind of item or inventory puzzles or anything like that. He typically thinks up something clever and gives you a limited number of commands to use, which is both good and bad. Good in that, like, I like the approachability of a parser game that limits your options. And limited parser games have become, I think, a big part of the comp over the last actually many years. At this point, it's probably not even novel, but they're something that like I really like to see. And he also has a real talent for whimsy. You looking back at things like the Grandma Bethlinda games, they are just grab bags of weird things that can happen when you type weird things in, and they're lovely. They're really great. Contrast that with games like The Wand, which I still have nightmares about. It's basically a 5-dimensional, Rubik's Cube that you have to solve while doing maths in your head.
The wand is great. But I do think Sage Sanctorum Scramble is more, there's a lot less math involved.
I was overwhelmed by the wand pretty much immediately. But anyway, but like even the games of his that I've been fully overwhelmed by, like the wand. I wanted to like it. It's really well presented, and like the whimsy carries you pretty far. Trouble in Sector 471 is another game by Arthur DiBianca. It's a bit of a different vibe. Most of the games of his that I've played before have either the sort of like, I don't know, magical or off the wall, nonsense kind of theming to them. This one is you are a robot, and your limited parser is because you have limited robot functionality, and you're an exterminator robot. It's a pretty terse game. It doesn't give you a lot of backstory on what's going on in the world of the game. By the way, again, this is a game that I have not completed because partially for time considerations, and also because I sort of waved the white flag at some point, mostly because I just don't have a puzzle brain right now. So apologies again, probably to Arthur DiBianca. I always enjoy and hate your games. This one, you play this exterminator robot, and you are tasked with exploring a sector 471, I guess. Sort of an 8x8 grid of rooms, which is nice. I love a very clear navigation, and you're trying to exterminate all the bugs, literal bugs, in this space. And there's a lot of other robots in the space doing their various jobs, and you have very limited type-ins available. So you can type things like com, which I assume means communicate and does various communicatey things. You zap, you have an exterminator zapper that you can use to zap bugs, among other things. And as you play through, you accumulate other parser commands as well as you kind of upgrade your robot or expand its functionality, which is great. I like that very, very much. And most of the puzzles were very clever. And also, he did a great job of providing a hints file. He doesn't give you just a straight walkthrough, but I always appreciate with these puzzly games when they provide you something. He just has a whole list of questions of things that you may have trouble with, and he ROT13 encoded all of the answers, so you can just get the answers that you want and not overdo it with your spoilers to yourself. So I really like this one a lot. I think of the Arthur DiBianca games I've played, this is one that I definitely want to continue with. It's one of the more approachable ones for sure. I think, if you're a newcomer to interactive fiction, or if you're the sort of person who typically doesn't think of themselves as much of a parser player, this one's going to be pretty approachable. Probably the number one thing that makes this an extremely approachable parser game, as these types of games go, even more so maybe than the very limited command set that you're given, that he uses in very increasingly creative ways, is that this game, unlike any other parser game I've played, I think it has a persistent on-screen map that's done in ASCII art. So it gives you like a 8x8 grid, just like a square on screen that's kind of partitioned off as a separate element of the screen. I would recommend, by the way, downloading this and playing it in a desktop parser, like I played it in Electrote, and this aspect of it worked really well there. It did not work when I tried to play. It did not work very well at all when I tried to play it in Frotz on iPad, and the web-based version had slightly weird layout. I don't know whether that was just the size of browser window I was playing at or what, but like this looks especially great to me playing it in the desktop Electrote interpreter. Yeah. But it's basically like having a dual window setup within the parser screen, and it even has some cute commands you can type in to change what the ASCII art background and like look of the map window within your screen is. You can have it just be blank, or you can have little, I don't know, squiggles made out of slash marks if you prefer to have a cool look to your window, which is very whimsical. But this is clearly probably something that was very difficult to implement in this system. So I give him big props for like a progressively disclosed auto mapping map system in a parser game. Never really seen it before, at least not like this. So really, really cool. That said, again, like I started hitting walls in this, and eventually my brain turned off, and so I never quite finished it. I think of the games that I've played for the comp and haven't finished, this is probably the number one on my list to go back to. But I don't really have a good estimate of the length of this. Puzzle games are always hard to really figure that out. But I would say probably a couple of hours. The game does not list a time on the comp page, but that's just a guess based on how much of the map I had disclosed and how much of the walkthrough I can guess at how much I've seen based on the length of the walkthrough and where I think I was in it. So I would say probably a couple of hours would be for this one. So, okay, again, highly recommend Arthur DiBianca's games. This one is probably one of the better entry points to his body of work. And maybe a pretty good intro to parser games generally. But it did, despite being one of his easier games, I think it did kick my butt.
I mean, you are in a baby brain mode, so like give yourself a little grace. I think I've seen pretty great reviews for this. I think folks are really enjoying it. And I think someone said a quote from something I read several years ago, so apologies, I don't have the source, but someone said like he writes puzzle games and whimsical games, and it's like a percentage thing. like Sage Sanctum Scramble is like 100% just puzzles. It's just like go in a room, do a puzzle, go in a room, do a puzzle. And then like Variety Box and Remarkable Egg, the Grandma Bethlinda games, are a little heavier on the whimsy. Like the puzzle's always there, but the whimsy is turned way up.
I accidentally bumped the dial and it's all whimsy this time. Yeah,
exactly. So
this one is a little more straight down the middle. It's, I would say, maybe a little more towards puzzle than whimsy, like, you know, slightly left of center on that, or whatever the axis is. But it is whimsical in its way. If you take the time to go and converse with each of the robots you interact with, they are, you know, they all have pretty simple things to say, very RPG town kind of vibe to them. They all have like one line of dialogue to share with you, no matter how many times you talk to them. But you know, hey, you're a robot too. Everybody's got problems. So it's definitely whimsical, but it's definitely more towards the puzzle angle, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of the highest rated ones he's had so far.
Really? I'm happy to hear that, because I think it's a very, very good game. My preference would be for Remarkable Egg, which I thought was hysterical. But, you know, different strokes.
It's also like people who like Arthur DiBianca play Arthur DiBianca. So like, you know what you're going for. So
absolutely.
You know, I appreciate knowing what you're going to get. And I find it funny that I'm beautifully shocked that you did this to yourself yet again.
I thought you were going to play this one, Laura. I thought you were going to play this one, and that I was going to be able to just like yes and you through the conversation.
I am going to play this one, but I'm going to play it for the next episode.
Okay, well, I'll eagerly await your thoughts. I'm glad that you're going to give it a shot.
Yeah, and it sounds like you enjoyed it, even though it was tough.
I did. And again, I plan to continue it. I've got my game saved. Definitely going back to it when I have some more time. And looking at the time, we are all out of time, so we're going to leave it there and talk about some more IFComp games soon. Just a reminder for folks who are planning to vote in the comp, you just need to play 5 games or more, and you don't even have to complete them in order to be able to vote on them. You have to play up to 2 hours, and at the 2-hour mark, if you're still playing, you can come up with your score at that point, or you can stop really at any point and come up with a score according to the rules of the comp. So it's really up to you. And you can vote on as many games as you want, but you have to vote on 5 or more for your votes to be counted. The comp is concluding on November 15th. I don't recall the exact time when the cutoff happens, but don't leave it to the last minute. It's like real voting, you know. Don't do that to yourself. Or your country. But I highly recommend that folks start tallying your votes. Start thinking about things in advance. Maybe even put your votes in as you go so that you don't forget at the end. This is a great time for interactions with the show. We love to hear from people about what they're playing in the comp. With as many games as there are in every year of IFComp, we can never touch even half of them, usually way less. And this year in particular, we are struggling because I have been so absent because of baby times. So if you have suggestions for us about things that you think we should be covering in IFComp, maybe you played something you thought was particularly cool or clever or interesting, let us know. This is an especially good time to let us know your thoughts about the games in this year's comp. We do plan at least one more episode on IFComp 2022. You can drop us a line about that either on our website, www.theshortgame.net, where there's a contact form. You can find us on Twitter @_shortgame. Or, of course, the very best way is to become our patron on Patreon and join us on our Discord. We have a conversation going about IFComp right now. So, and if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/theshortgame and support us. Even just $1 a month will get you instant access to our Discord. And if you support at a higher level, the $5 level, I will send you some stickers. Short game stickers. They look great. Put them on your laptop or whatever. And you can find me on Twitter @RayganK. That's RayGanK. Laura, where can people find you?
On Twitter @Laura J. Nash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @8BitShane.
And thanks once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.